Part 32. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 311. Chapter 311 Hit her where it hurts. You're already here, just go out and relax. Yoon Chugseok gently shook her arm and said coquettishly, besides, we're almost there. Since this was the case, Yao Ying said nothing more. The car quickly drove to a separate courtyard. She looked at it strangely. Aren't you here to relax? Where are you? This is my house. Yoon Chugseok smiled, opened the door and got out of the car, then turned around to pull her. He poked his head out to look suspiciously, and was helped out of the car by her. Your house? When did you buy it? Why didn't I know? Does your father know? Mom, Dad must know everything he does. He has a woman and a child outside. Did he let you know before? This rhetorical question instantly made Yao Ying lose her temper and her face became a little unhappy. Okay, I said the wrong thing, don't be angry. Trust me, you will be happy when you get here. He smiled mysteriously, and then walked into the house holding her arm. What kind of medicine are you selling in the gourd? Stop at the door. Yao Ying looked at her seriously. Shwe'er said that this house belonged to her, but she didn't know when she bought the house. So besides here, is there any other place? What else doesn't she know? Mom, don't worry, she said as she opened the door, and then said loudly, we are going home. Go home, Yao Ying frowned, and the next second, her eyes widened. In front of her, a person she had not expected appeared at all, a person she had been quietly looking for a long time but could not find. A long, far voyage, she couldn't even finish her words in surprise, and she even wondered if there was something wrong with her eyes. Luo Yuanhang. Her son. Why is he here? There was a problem in his company and he called himself, but he never contacted him again, and he didn't dare to make a big move, so he could only search secretly, but he couldn't find it after so long, and he even worried that he couldn't bear the blow. What happened? But there was no bad news. She had been worried for so long. As a result, them, looked at Luo Yuanhang, then turned to look at Yoon Chugseok, so shocked. She never thought that these two people would get together. She never mentioned to Shwe'er that she had a son. Shwe'er, you guys. Mom, actually I've known for a long time that I have a brother. Yoon Chugseok said with a smile, walked over and directly took Luo Yuanhang's arm. I know it's difficult for you, and it's because of your difficulty that you don't tell me, so I just pretend not to know. Maybe this will prevent Dad from getting suspicious. It's okay now, our family is finally reunited. Took Luo Yuanhang and walked towards Yao Ying, then held her arms, one on each side, smiling sweetly. Yao Ying still hadn't recovered from the shock. She looked at her children. In fact, she had hoped that one day, she could hold her own children openly, but she didn't expect that it would be now. When she was in the worst mood and at her lowest, he actually gave her such a surprise. Let's call it a surprise. She still doesn't know whether the future will be happy or sad. Shwe'er, how did you find Yuanhang? Finally digesting this information, she calmed down and asked. It's actually not difficult to find my brother. His situation was not very good at the time. In fact, it was inconvenient for you, otherwise you would have found your brother a long time ago. The reason why I didn't tell you is because he was in a rather troublesome situation at the time. You also knew that there were many people looking for him at that time, so I tried to reduce the risk as much as possible and didn't tell you first. Wouldn't you be angry? She stuck out her tongue with a playful look on her face. Hearing what she said, Yao Ying couldn't bear to blame her. She was relieved to see her son safe and sound. What's more, what Shwe'er said made sense. Yuanhang's situation at that time was indeed very troublesome and embarrassing, so there was nothing wrong with reducing unnecessary contacts. I'm not angry, aren't you angry either, Shwe'er? Long ago, She had thought about how Shweta would react if one day she told her that she had a half-brother. I thought that she might reject or resist, and even thought about how to ease her psychology and make her accept it, but I didn't expect that she had known it for a long time, and from now on, she can call each brother so smoothly, and there is nothing wrong with it. As if unhappy. Angry? Why should I be angry? I know, Mom, you have a reason for not telling me, she shrugged, and I have a brother. I don't know how happy I am. Looking up at Luo Yuanhang, he smiled happily. Luo Yuanhang also looked down at her and smiled fondly. Looking at this pair of siblings, Yao Ying's gloomy heart finally felt somewhat comforted. Shweta. Then what do you think about that wild? After a pause, she stopped, faintly worried. If Shweta can accept having a half-brother, can she also accept a half-brother? Seeing what she wanted to say at a glance, Yun Chugzio let go of Luo Yuanhang's arm, walked to the sofa with her mother, sat down next to her, leaned into her arms and said, "Mom, you mean the one at home, bastard? How can he be the same as my brother? My brother was born before you and Dad got together. He is my biological brother, but that woman destroyed our family and tried to take Dad away. Dad is married to you, he is still restless after that. He is sorry for you and our family. I will not admit that, bastard." Hearing what she said, Yao Ying suddenly felt relieved. And it sounds quite reasonable. That's right. Yuan Hang was born before she got together with Yun Zhongcheng. She was not unfaithful to him, at best she was just hiding something, but that was different. Now he even breaks into the house and wants to steal everything from the Yun family. Shweta, you and your mother are of the same mind, so I'm relieved. He patted her hand, as if he had found an ally. Yun Chugzio nodded vigorously. Of course I am of the same mind as my mother. Dad is so stupid that he brought that born to that woman into the house, and my uncle is even more confused, saying that this is Dad's private matter and he can't control it. What, your uncle actually said that? She had been upset about this matter for a long time, but she hesitated and didn't tell her eldest brother. She didn't expect that Yun Boqian would have such an attitude. Well, the uncle said it himself, he doesn't care. So Mom, if we, mother and daughter, don't keep the same mind, we will be the ones who will be kicked out of the Yun family soon. She grabbed Yao Ying's hand hard and said through gritted teeth. Yao Ying's heart skipped a beat, this also touched her sore spot. End of this chapter. Si Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 312. Chapter 312. Okay, I agree. That's right. If she doesn't take some measures, she will be kicked out soon. Yun Chugzio and Luo Yuanhang looked at each other. He sat down across from him knowingly and said, Mom, how much have you sacrificed for the Yun family over the years? You have worked hard and considered everything for them. For that man, we, mother and son, after so many years of not being able to recognize each other, you quit your career and devoted yourself to being his husband and raising children. In the end, what did you get in exchange? These words stabbed the knife into her heart even more. The more I think about it, the angrier I feel, and the more I think about it, the more unfair I feel. That's right, for so many years, she didn't dare to recognize her son, and she worked hard for the Yun family. She did so much, but in the end, because she didn't give birth to a son, Yun Zhongcheng was going to kick her away? Why? Mom, it's so unfair for Dad to do this, Yun Chugzio said softly. You are all right, but you know how stubborn your father is on this matter. Even if I am reluctant, what can I do? She sighed quietly, raised her hand and touched Yun Chugzio's hand. It's a pity that you are a girl. It would be great if Shweta were a boy. She could legitimately take over the Yun family's property. With her abilities and skills, she could even replace Da Fang and become the leader of the Yun family. This sentence again. Yun Chugzio hates these words the most in her life. A strange light flashed in her eyes, and she immediately smiled again. Mom, although I am a girl, brother is not. Brother? She was startled, and Yao Ying raised her eyes to look at Luo Yuanhang, who was standing on one side. She was stunned for 2 seconds and then shook her head. No, no, your brother is not from the Yun family. Who says he is not from the Yun family? Yun Chugxiu interrupted her words and smiled meaningfully. Shwe. Mom, although brother is not from the Yun family, he has your blood in him. You, me, and brother, we are a family. Everything in the Yun family should be in our hands. She continued. I have to say that her words had a deep temptation on Yao Ying. Us. Yes, us, Luo Yuanhang also emphasized. Mom, the men of the Yun family have gone too far. You have paid so much and you can't see it. Your sister is so capable and you can't see it, but you want to give away all the property. Are you willing to be a bastard? She is not willing to give in, of course she is not willing to give in. But what can she do if she doesn't want to give in? She can't convince her husband. But now. Shwe, what do you want to do? Yao Ying is not stupid. At this time, she naturally knows that the brother and sister have already thought of some plan. Do they want to tell her, or ask for her opinion? Looking at each other, Yun Chugxiu smiled and said, Mom, I want my brother to join the company. Enter the company. Although I had imagined it, I was still shocked when I actually heard it. No, no, your father will find out, she said no immediately. Mom, not to mention I will make arrangements for personnel matters. I just joined the company as an ordinary department manager so that my father will not find out. So what if he finds out? Will he know about the relationship between brother and you? She was full of confidence. Said, he didn't know it for so many years, and he won't know it now. But what's more, I introduced you to the company. I will arrange all this so that Dad won't find out that I have a relationship with you. After a pause, she said, besides, I don't want you to feel uncomfortable saying this. Now that Dad has arranged for that to join the company, he is fully focused on that and will not pay attention to the fact that the company has hired a new branch manager. It sounds reasonable, but it doesn't feel very practical. But if Yuanhang joins the company, what can be changed? Mom, you are confused. After my brother joined the company, I have a helper. We, brother and sister, can work together to make a fortune. Yun Chugxiu continued to talk about her plan. Recently, I plan to start a new project in the company and establish a new one. The branch has submitted a proposal, and I believe it will be passed soon. When the time comes, I will become the manager of the branch there. When the time comes, we will cooperate with the outside world. Not only will we have the company's money in our hands, but we will also have to keep it. Bastard kicked out of the company. She already had a comprehensive plan in mind, and her eyes were so fierce that even Yao Ying would feel a little chilled. She felt increasingly unfamiliar with this daughter. Although she stands with him and was born by her, sometimes, he still feels a little inexplicably afraid of her. Mother. He called her twice in succession before she came back to her senses. Yao Ying smiled reluctantly. It sounds pretty good. But you also know how much your father values that bastard. It's not that easy to kick him out of the company. No matter how much Dad attaches great importance to it, it still depends on whether the elders and shareholders in the company agree. If that little scoundrel makes an unforgivable mistake, do you think Dad can still protect him? Yao Ying looked at her in trance, and Luo Yuanhang on the side continued, yes. I still have experience in this matter, Mom, don't worry, I will cooperate well with my sister in the company. Sooner or later, the Yun family's industry will they all belong to us, mother and son. At that time, Dad will listen to you in everything. You can get him kicked out if you want. If he is still protecting that woman, let him get out of here. Yoon Chug-seo said domineeringly with a flick of her right hand. Yao Ying wanted to laugh, but couldn't seem to do so. She let out a long sigh and said, "Okay, now that you have thought about it, what can I do?" In the whole thing, it was as if they were the brother and sister in the plan, and there was nothing she needed to do. "Mom, you don't have to do anything. As long as you know about this, just pretend you don't know." Lo Yun Hang said hurriedly. "The reason why I informed her is that she will know sooner or later. It is better to tell her in advance to avoid accidentally getting involved later." "Actually, Mom, you can't do anything. You can definitely use your advantages to help us when necessary," Yoon Chug-seo said after blinking. "What's the meaning? Mom, don't you know a lot of journalist friends? Have you forgotten that what they like most is to dig up the secrets of these wealthy families? Even if Dad takes that home, he doesn't dare to reveal his true identity, and he still wants to take it step by step. Come on, shall we foster him in your name first? If the paparazzi reveals that he is actually his illegitimate child, then his image and your image will be. Is there any need to think about this? Once it is revealed that Yoon Jong-cheng is a scumbag, he will be punished, and she is naturally a bitter image that people sympathize with. However, such things will definitely affect Yoon's stock price, so considering the overall situation, she will tolerate it." He didn't say anything. "Mom, of course I don't mean now, I mean, when necessary," as if he guessed what she was thinking, Yoon Chug-seo said again. After thinking deeply for a while, Yao Ying seemed to have made up her mind. She nodded and said, "Okay, I agree." End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 313. Chapter 313. I have no doubt. Zhongcheng, Airport. After the plane landed, there was a car arranged by Yao waiting for him immediately. He got in the car and went straight to Chu's house. Soo-yoon slept on the plane and couldn't fall asleep now. She was just worried and stared out the window in a daze. When the car was halfway through the journey, Yao answered the phone. After hanging up, his expression became even more solemn. Is it related to the Chu family? It was so close that it was hard not to hear something. She also knew that if he felt suspicious, he would definitely investigate. Now besides Chu Chen, there is another person in the Chu family. Su Yunmo looked at him. Chu Xinggao. These three words are like a spell, opening up some dusty memories. How long has it been since I heard this name? Chu Xinggao, her brother-in-law, the youngest son of the Chu family, and Chu Chen's uncle. In fact, my grandfather liked this little son very much back then, but something happened later. I can't remember exactly what it was. After all, he was young, but then this uncle left the Chu family. I don't know where he went. The Chu family, the name was also kept secret, and no one mentioned it again. If Yao hadn't mentioned it, she would have almost forgotten about such a person. Brother-in-law. He's back, she muttered to herself, frowning. Well, I'm back, he nodded. The news was very definite. The most important thing is that Chu Xinggao is not only back, but his return is not good news. Grandpa passed away, so it's appropriate for him to come back. After thinking about it, Su-yoon said softly. No matter what happened in the past, he was his father after all, and it was only natural for a son to come back for the funeral. If it's just a funeral, that's okay, but... Yao looked at her deeply. If you return to Chu's house, it means you will face a storm. Do you want to go back? Even if there is a knife from the sky, I will go back, she said firmly. The answer was already given, but he asked again. In fact, even if a knife fell from the sky, he would accompany her to face it? Smiling slightly, Yao began to tell her what he had learned so that she could be mentally prepared. Well, no matter what I'm going to say next, you must stay calm no matter what you hear. In fact, ever since Chu Chen emphasized to her that it was best not to go back, she had already had a bad feeling in her heart, and this feeling was closely related to her. She wasn't very clear about what happened in the Chu family, but it must have been for her, otherwise Chu Chen wouldn't have said that. So Yao asked her to calm down, but she didn't have much emotional fluctuations. She just nodded and said, "You say it? The death of your grandpa is not considered as simple as death by illness by the Chu family now. They believe that your grandpa was poisoned." He considered his words. In fact, what he learned was much more vicious than this wording. A flash of shock flashed in her eyes. Although Su-Yun was mentally prepared, she was still somewhat shocked. Do they think it was me who poisoned them? She quickly guessed it. Since it was directed at her, he must have decided so, but it was too ridiculous. After receiving his affirmative look, she laughed angrily. That's so ridiculous. Why would I poison my grandpa? Besides, I haven't been back to Chu's house in many years, and I only went back when grandpa celebrated his birthday. We didn't even stay for 2 days. Grandpa died yesterday. When did I poison him? Why did I poison him? There are various signs that this is a game. Since it is a game, there is no reason why. What's more, you also know that this is unjust, so why bother to accuse him? In fact, he was very angry when he first heard about it, but the current situation is still unclear. If it was a frame-up, why frame it on her? Who would benefit from this? In other words, who is going to do it? Since Chu Chen reminded her not to come back, it shouldn't be him. The most suspicious thing is that Chu Xinggao came back suddenly. He had been missing for so long and came back at this juncture. According to reliable information, he currently has a huge say in the Chu family. Although Chu Chen is the leader of the Chu family, he is still a junior after all. Many elders of the Chu family are still very supportive of Chu Xinggao's return. Are you afraid? He gently held her hand and asked warmly. I haven't done it, so what should I be afraid of? Su-Yun raised her lips and said softly, I'm just curious about who is causing trouble. Also, if Grandpa's death is not an accident, then who is the real one? The murderer. The real murderer may be the person who threw dirty water on you. He held her hand tightly and said, I will definitely help you find this person. The car soon arrived at the Chu family's property. In fact, on the way back from the airport, I could vaguely sense that something was wrong. To be precise, not long after we came out of the airport, we were already followed by 2 cars. Su Feng asked what to do, but Yao said don't worry about it and just let them follow. After driving into the Chu family's territory, the following car gradually disappeared, as if it was just to guard them as they entered the Chu family. Shacks have been erected along the way, and the long road is paved with white cloth, giving it a sad, dull, and weird atmosphere. After receiving the news of her grandfather's death, Su-Yun felt uncomfortable, but because of the sudden change and the atmosphere of conspiracy, she had too many things to think about, which diluted the sad feeling. At this moment, seeing the wreaths all over the place, and occasionally seeing the servants tied with white cloth, the feeling of losing her grandpa forever surrounded her tightly, and she couldn't help but feel sad, and her eyes were red. Hand out his hand to take her into his arms, gently squeezing her shoulders. He could always understand her thoughts immediately. She has really lost her grandpa forever. I drove into the Chu family's yard and stopped at the parking lot. There was already a row of cars parked neatly there. It looked like a big scene. As soon as the car stopped, I saw 2 people waiting outside. Yao glanced down at her and saw that she had already put away her silent tears and took out a tissue to wipe away the tears, her face looking surprisingly calm. I can do it, she said lowly and firmly. With a raised eyebrow, he responded, I have no doubt. She opens the door and gets out of the car, No matter what kind of wind and rain she has to face, she is not afraid. Not only did she want to clear her name, but if her grandfather was really murdered, she also wanted to find out the murderer with her own hands. Immediately after she got out of the car, Si Yao followed not far behind her, while Su Feng followed Si Yao's side. As soon as the three of them reached the steps, they were already surrounded by a group of people before they even walked up. End of this chapter. Si Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 314. Chapter 314, Capture Her. Su Yun looked around and said, "What do you want to do?" Those people were obviously ordered to surround them and did not take any further steps. Su Feng stood in front of the two of them and was on alert, looking tense and ready to explode. "You are not from my Chu family. What do you want to do now when you are standing on the territory of my Chu family?" After looking around briefly, Su Yun saw that these people were not from the Chu family at all, so she scolded them coldly. "Who says they are not from the Chu family?" a voice came, and then a figure walked out of the house. Those people automatically moved out of the way until the person came closer. The face is more familiar, but there are some faint wrinkles. The most obvious one is a scar diagonally on the left cheek. Although the hair is still black, it is just a lot sparser, and he seems to be balding. Although there are still some differences compared with the memory, Su Yun also recognized it: Chu Xinggao. "Brother-in-law," she called. Chu Xinggao laughed and said, "Okay, you still recognize my uncle, so the Chu family didn't support you in vain." If she hadn't done all the homework before coming back, Su Yun would only be surprised by his appearance, and would even think that he simply came back for a funeral, but now she knows very well that his appearance is by no means that simple. "My uncle has not been heard from for many years. Grandpa is having a big funeral today. What are you going to do? Are you going to use force for Grandpa's funeral?" She glanced sideways at the group of people, and they all looked bad. "I don't want to use any force. It's just that the old man passed away suddenly. Something strange happened. We have to find out the reason." "Su Yun, your grandfather raised you and treated you well, even though he was harsh to you." "A little bit, but you can't be so cruel and do such a cruel thing to your own grandfather," he said with emotion, his tone light and airy, and then he suddenly raised his eyes becoming extremely sharp. That look was particularly sharp, as if he was trying to judge her. "No, it is not a trial, she has been condemned." "Uncle, I don't understand what you are saying. Even if you are a prisoner, you still have the right to plead. What's more, I didn't do anything. How can you accuse me of such a crime? You said there was something fishy about my grandfather's death." I think so. If you have any doubts, you should call the police and let the police investigate. Grandpa's death is suspicious, so naturally the police should be called to find out the real culprit and the forensic doctor should examine what happened." He wanted to condemn her just because he was talking empty words. "Dream. Call the police," Chu Xinggao sneered and said, "It's a joke. Who is my Chu family? If the police are allowed to interfere in family affairs, won't it make people laugh if word spreads about it? Don't think I don't know what you are doing. I'm afraid the police have already been bribed by you. But it doesn't matter. Fortunately, I have already found Dr. Qin and done the examination myself." "Su Yun, please stop making excuses. Dr. Qin is the family doctor of the Chu family. He has always done various physical examinations and provided daily health care for everyone in the Chu family. But what exactly Dr. Qin said is unknown. So, you suspected that there was another reason for Grandpa's death, and you didn't call the police or investigate, so you just put the accusation on my head." Su Yun looked at him with cold eyes. "Uncle, you have been away from home for so many years. Why don't you prepare such a big gift for me when you come back?" Chu Xinggao nodded. "Yeah, I didn't expect that in the past few years since I left home, you little girl would turn out to be so cruel as you are today. No matter what you say, I have to go in first to pay homage to Grandpa. There is no point in arguing here. She wants to pay her respects to her grandfather first. It would be best if she could see his body, and at least let her find out what happened. You are not qualified. Step forward and block the door, not letting her in at all. Chu Xinggao waved his hand, take it down. Those people rushed up immediately, apparently intending to seize her by force. Wait a minute, Sci Yao raised his voice and took a step forward to block Su Yun from behind him. He glanced at Chu Xinggao and said, if you fight in front of Mr. Chu Sol and spread the word, won't you be afraid of being laughed at? Narrowing his eyes, Chu Xinggao looked at him proudly, disdainfully, who are you? It's your turn to take care of our Chu family's household affairs. I am Su Yun's husband, and Mr. Chu is also my grandfather, so naturally it is my turn to take care of this matter, Sci Yao said unhurriedly. If I remember correctly, the steward of the Chu family he has always been Chu Chen. Why is it that the Chu family is so unruly? The person in charge didn't say anything, and it was the turn of others to shout and kill. After being insulted by him, Chu Xinggao was not angry at all. He lowered his head and played with the ring on his little finger casually, and said slowly, then your news may be too late. My nephew was indeed in charge of it before, but now that I'm back, of course I'm in charge, so it's time to let the juniors take a break. Just like the information he found, Chu Chen was indeed a liar. It's just that Chu Chen has been in power in the Chu family for only a year or two. How could he be ignored so easily? The whole thing is weird. I want to see Chu Chen, Su Yun said loudly. This brother-in-law is really suspicious, but he is one step ahead and seems to have taken control of the Chu family first, so she can only figure out all this after meeting Chu Chen. Chu Chen is overly sad and is resting now. How can you, a murderer, have the face to meet Chu Chen and your grandpa? Chu Xinggao said coldly, if you still have a little bit of conscience and know how to repent, just be honest. Maybe because you are half of the Chu family, I can discuss it with the clan elders and treat you lightly. I will never plead guilty to something I haven't done. Su Yun straightened her back and stepped forward, I must pay homage to my grandpa today. Let's see who dares to stop me. She was already very sad about her grandfather's death, but now that she is still labeled like this, she is not only sad, but also angry. The brother-in-law whom I haven't seen for many years has turned the Chu family upside down when he came back. What does he want to do? Looking at him without hesitation, he walked step by step towards the direction of the house. Get her, Chu Xinggao said coldly, turning around at the same time and walking towards the house confidently. Obviously, he absolutely believed that the people he brought could stop Su Yun. After all, the people he brought back were all members of the Guo family. Even though they are not from the Chu family, they are still members of the martial arts family. Su Yun, a girl, has not practiced martial arts well since she was a child, and she has been away from the Chu family for these years. It is still easy to deal with her. End of this chapter. Si Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 315. Chapter 315. The visitor is ill-intentioned. There was a loud ringing of bells behind him, and the corners of Chu Xinggao's lips raised. Just as he was about to turn around, he felt a gust of cold wind. The next second, a hand was already on his shoulder. Uncle, you are so majestic. Even though Chu Xinggao was on guard, he broke into a cold sweat. Looking out of the corner of his eye, he saw that all the men he had brought with him had fallen to the ground in a mess. How did she do it? How is it possible in such a short time and at such a fast speed? You. He was so shocked that his voice became hoarse. He swallowed and said, do you dare to attack your elders? I respect you as an elder, and you are the elder. If you are not an elder in my heart, you are worse than dirt, Suyun said word by word while looking at him. It is true that he is a member of the Chu family and the youngest son that her grandfather once loved. Because of these 2 points, she still has a trace of respect for this uncle whom she has not seen for many years, even if he has to treat her as soon as they meet. Take action. But how could she be willing to admit to such an unprovoked charge? She must find out the truth. Presumptuous. A deep voice sounded, and a group of people came out of it. The voice came from the leader. Second grandpa. After a glance, Suyun recognized him. That is Mr. Chu's cousin Chu Qiudong. In terms of seniority, he is called the second grandfather. He is also an old man in the Chu family's genealogy. He has not been involved in the affairs of the Chu family for many years, but he unexpectedly appeared at this time. But it's not unusual. After all, it's the old man's funeral. As a cousin, it's normal for him to attend. At this moment, he had a sullen face, followed by a group of Chu family elders, and stood in front of her. Suyun, what are you doing? The person who comes here is evil. They were on Chu Zhenggao's side when they opened their mouth. Why didn't they show up when she was being challenged? Now that Chu Zhenggao was restrained, they started to accuse her of being presumptuous. Suyun smiled mockingly and said, for my grandpa's funeral, my uncle led a group of unidentified people who were not from my clan and used force against me in front of my grandfather's funeral. Shouldn't the clan elders ask me, who is my uncle, what do you want to do? Chu Qiudong glanced at Chu Zhenggao lightly, then looked at her and said, anyway, if you attack your uncle, is it okay for this to spread? Today is your grandpa's funeral, and all the elders in the family are here. What are you talking about? Why don't you let go of your hands? Do it. Suyun's eyes widened and she looked at the people she had knocked down. She said, when it comes to taking action, these are the ones who do it, right? I'm just saying hello to my uncle. Since the second grandpa doesn't like it, then I'll let go. As she spoke, she raised her hands with an innocent look on her face. Only Chu Zhenggao knew that as soon as she let go of her hand, a heavy burden seemed to be lifted off his shoulders. Looking at the obviously soft and weak hands, a little girl didn't know where she got such strength. Putting it on her shoulders felt like 1,000 pounds of weight. If he hadn't supported it hard, she would have almost been unable to bear it and knelt down. Looking at her hands with surprise and suspicion, Chu Zhenggao couldn't believe it. Is this still the timid little girl he knew before who always avoided practicing martial arts? Okay, now that you're back, let's put a stick of incense on your grandpa and pay homage to him. As the most important patriarch in the family, the others will not say much if he speaks. What's more, Suyun came back to pay homage, so she had no objection and went straight to the house. Yao followed immediately, but was stopped by Chu Qiudong with a cane. Hey, young man. This is our Chu family's private matter, and visitors are not allowed. I am not a visitor. I am Mr. Chu's grandson-in-law, and I can be considered half of the Chu family. It is natural for me to offer incense to my grandfather today. After saying that, he was about to move forward. But Chu Qiudong's crutches still didn't move away, blocking it firmly. I've also heard about your marriage, but it seems to be just a verbal agreement, and the marriage hasn't happened yet. Since it hasn't happened yet, you can't be considered a member of my Chu family. The Chu family has the rules of the Chu family. Since you are here, you should abide by the rules. Yao wanted to say something else. Suyun gave him a wink and then said, what Grandpa Second said makes sense. Just drink some tea here and wait for me. I'll go pay my respects to Grandpa soon. Although she didn't say anything, Yao understood it from her eyes. The atmosphere in the Chu family was obviously wrong. The two of them had a rough idea before they came, but the situation seemed to be a little worse than expected. I don't know what Chu Zenggao did to make the elders like the second grandfather stand aside. On his side. Anyway, the morning hall is inside and the living room is outside. There is only a wall between them. If there is anything, he can take care of it outside. Si Yao didn't insist anymore and just said softly, "Don't be too sad." Su Yun nodded and walked to the inner hall. I didn't notice it when I was outside, but when I entered, I realized that the formation inside was much stronger than outside. All the members of the family, named or not, came. The clan elders sat on one side, and on the other side were the Chu family members and disciples. In the front seat, Chu Chen was guarding the soul. She was a little surprised. At first, she didn't see Chu Chen outside. She thought he was under house arrest or something else had happened, but she didn't expect that he was in front of her grandfather's soul. Yes, as the eldest grandson, he should be here, but why did he not react at all when Chu Zenggao questioned her like this? After calming down, she looked at the memorial tablet with burning eyes. An enlarged photo of her grandfather was placed on it. Her voice and smile were still there, making it hard for her to believe that the old man had just left like this. "Grandpa, I'm back to see you." As soon as I spoke, I couldn't help but burst into tears. I lit a stick of incense and bowed deeply. I was about to step forward but was stopped by someone. Su Yun looked over and saw that it was Chu Qiudong, the second grandpa. He followed her in just now and watched her actions with cold eyes without speaking. It was not until she stepped forward to insert the incense stick that she stopped him. "Su Yun, you are not qualified. Coming back today will be a battle." She expected it and was not afraid. Only. He glanced over and saw Chu Chen kneeling on one side, silent and not looking at her. He didn't know what he was thinking. But before coming back, he did call her to ask her not to come back, which showed that he at least cared about her a little bit. "Grandpa, what do you mean?" she asked calmly and unhurriedly. "Let me ask you, did you give the incense used in your grandpa's room? Did you make it yourself?" Chu Qiudong stared at her with sharp eyes, as if he was looking at a criminal. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 316. Chapter 316 is also prepared. Incense. Su Yun was slightly focused, but at the same time she also understood. So, the problem arises with the incense. I made it for my grandpa. He has been suffering from insomnia recently and cannot sleep well, so I made some incense to calm the mind and calm the mind. "What's wrong?" she asked calmly. "What's wrong? You still dare to ask what's wrong?" Chu Zenggao on the side sneered. "It's so peaceful to calm the mind and calm the mind. You are sending your grandpa to the road of eternal peace of mind. You mean there's something wrong with incense? Instead of beating around the bush, it's better to be straightforward and speak openly if you have anything to say. Don't expect her to plead guilty to some unfounded crime. Don't you know if there's something wrong with the incense?" Chu Zenggao's words were full of sarcasm. Su Yun looked over and saw that none of the elders present spoke. In fact, she could see very clearly that these people either agreed with Chu Zenggao's statement and felt that there was indeed something wrong with her incense and that they were the culprit of her grandfather's death. Either they are not taking sides for the time being and maintain a neutral attitude while watching the show. It would be difficult to expect these elders to be fair. But the most important thing is that Chu Chen did not speak. He just knelt in front of the soul in silence, with a cold and indifferent expression, as if everything that happened had nothing to do with him. It seems that we can only rely on ourselves in this battle after all. Yes, I knew whether there was a problem with the incense, at least when it came out of my hands. As for whether there was a problem with the intermediate links or anything else, I'm not sure, she responded with a sneer. Not to mention whether the problem really lies with the incense. Even if there is really a problem with the incense, it does not mean that it is her. So many people come in and out of the Chu family every day, and there are people waiting around my grandfather, and maybe even people sneaking in. Who can predict that there will be no problem? But her words were obviously not recognized. Haha, you are really eloquent and good at evading. After a pause, Chu Xinggao continued, yes, there is indeed someone waiting on your grandfather's side. Uncle Luo has been an old man in the Chu family for many years. He is here. The Chu family is older than you. Do you want to say that Uncle Luo did it? Oh, by the way, I heard that Chu Chen got that incense from you, right? Or maybe you mean, it wasn't you or Uncle Luo, but... Turning sideways, his eyes fell on Chu Chen, who was kneeling there, with a cold smile on his lips. He said nothing, but he said everything. Su Yunyining. At this moment, she suddenly understood why Chu Chen remained silent and why the hat was placed directly on her head. If she refuses to admit it, the blame will fall on Uncle Luo or Chu Chen. In other words, Chu Chen himself cannot escape this responsibility. But, it's simply ridiculous. Haha. She sneered 3 times. This laughter was so sudden that it shocked everyone present. She actually smiled in such a solemn place like the morning hall, which was too presumptuous and showed too little regard for the deceased and the elders. As the eldest man, Chu Qiudong's face darkened and he said in a deep voice, Su Yun, don't be too presumptuous in front of your grandpa's soul. You can still laugh. How can you be worthy of the grandpa who raised you? Second grandpa, how can I not laugh at such a ridiculous drama today in front of my grandpa's funeral? Even if grandpa is alive in heaven, he will laugh. His old man has just passed away, and there are people who can't wait to cause trouble. Chu Xinggao glared at her. Who do you think is causing trouble? Whoever stirs up trouble knows it in his heart. Using his words to reply to him, Su Yun stared at him without hesitation and walked towards him step by step. Chu Xinggao, I respect you as my elder and call you uncle, but you don't want to. That's too much. None of the clan elders here know that it has been many years since you were kicked out of the Chu family by grandpa, and everyone did not mention it for your face. Do you really think that we don't remember it? You came back to attend grandpa's funeral. It's natural for us. I don't object, but if you take this opportunity to cause some trouble, I'm sorry, please get out of the Chu family. Pointing to the door with one hand, he scolded him unceremoniously. Chu Xinggao opened his eyes wide and looked at the little girl in front of him who had just reached his shoulders but was so powerful that he was almost stunned by her. He unconsciously took a step back, then regained his composure, stood firm, and said, what a joke. My surname is Chu, and I am from the Chu family. What qualifications do you, a foreigner with the surname Su, have to ask me and your uncle to get out? Su Yun, when your grandfather was still alive, he thought that you were young and had no parents to rely on, so he raised you in the Chu family. But don't forget that your surname will never be Chu. Chu Xinggao, what age are you in and you are still here talking about people with different surnames? In this world, whether you are close or not has nothing to do with your surname. People's hearts are so hard to explain. She turned around and glanced at him. Chu Chen curled his lips. You said I tampered with the incense. Okay, where's the evidence? Stretching out her hand towards him, she said, now is a legal society, and everything must be evidenced. If you think there is something wrong with the incense, please bring out the test report. If you say that I have tampered with something, please bring out the evidence. Also, even if it is murder and arson, he still has a motive. Why should I do this? Do you want to convict her with empty words and just a few words? I knew you would say that. In response to her question, Chu Xinggao was not speechless, but looked like he was getting what he wanted. He clapped his palms twice, and soon someone came forward and handed something like a document into his hands. At the same time, there were many copies, which were distributed to the hands of the clan elders. Picking up the thing, Chu Zinggao shook it in his hand. Do you think I will stand here and teach you a lesson without evidence? I am your elder, don't you know that you have to convince people when doing things? Open your eyes and watch carefully. Look, what is this? Slamming the document into her arms, Su-Yun raised her hand to catch it and glanced down at the test report. He actually took the incense for testing and identification. It was really fast and he was well prepared. After a quick glance, I could still understand the identification content and results even though there were a lot of professional terminology. The summary was just one sentence: there are chronic poisons in incense. Inhaling a small amount will have little effect, but over time it will be fatal. Uncles all know that my father is not in good health recently. I am actually abroad and care about the Chu family. I have been looking for famous doctors to treat my father. Unexpectedly, it was a step too late, Chu Zinggao said to everyone, his expression she said sadly, if my father is ill and passes away, then I have nothing to say. I just hate that I can't fulfill my filial piety, but if he is harmed by someone, I will never let that person go. No matter who he is. End of this chapter. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 317. Chapter 317. To put it bluntly, they are just excuses. Well said. If there is another hidden reason for Grandpa's death, I will definitely investigate the truth. So. She looked around and said, call the police. As he said that, he took out his mobile phone and said, since we all hold different opinions and have different opinions, it is best to hand over this matter to the police. It is the most fair and just thing. Once the matter is investigated clearly, Grandpa can rest in peace. However, before she could dial out the call, her arm was held down. Chu Qiudong's brows knitted into knots and he said solemnly, you can't call the police. Yes, you can't call the police, you can't call the police. All the clan elders around him spoke up one after another, surprisingly unanimously in favor of not calling the police. Our Chu family is a powerful family with a century-old foundation. If something like this happened, no matter who did it, it would be a shame if word spread. This matter can only be resolved within the confines of the Chu family. No matter who it is, the Chu family belongs to the Chu family. The law decides, no outsiders are needed to intervene. Chu Qiudong's words were obviously the sentiments of most of the clan elders, and they all nodded in agreement. Second Grandpa. This is not a trivial matter, it is a matter of life and death. It is related to the cause of my grandpa's death. If someone really wants to harm my grandpa, he is a murderer. How can he use family law to solve the problem? Su-Yun never expected that these old-fashioned people refused to call the police and wanted to resolve the matter privately. Don't think that after studying outside for a few days, nothing will happen. Let me tell you, my old man is not dead yet, and I still have a place to speak in the Chu family. It's not your turn to point fingers. The cause of Grandpa's death will definitely be investigated, but if you dare to call the police and ruin the reputation of our Chu family for hundreds of years, you will no longer be a member of the Chu family from now on. Pointing his finger at her, his words were extremely harsh. Looking over, I saw that everyone was silent. Obviously everyone agreed with this statement. Looking at Chu Chen again, he was silent, as if he couldn't hear, as if all this had nothing to do with him. Chu Chen, do you think so too? She couldn't help but ask. Chu Chen has nothing to do with you, and his opinions are not qualified to be used as a reference. From today on, I will temporarily take over the affairs of the Chu family. I will definitely investigate the cause of Dad's death. Chu Zinggao arranged his cufflinks, straightened his back and said, haha, Chu Chen has long been in charge of the Chu family. Do you think you want to seize power just by saying a word? Su-Yun, Chu Zinggao scolded, I still regard you as a member of the Chu family, you'd better not be disrespectful. She wanted to say something more, but then she yelled, "That's enough." They all looked in the direction of the sound and saw Chu Chen slowly standing up, with his upper body still straight and his hands hanging by his sides. He turned his head to look at them. "Suyun, stop talking." Chu Chen, she looked at him in disbelief, but she didn't expect that when he finally spoke, he said this. "The cause of Grandpa's death will definitely come to light no matter who is the real murderer, he will not be able to escape punishment," he said with certainty every word. His eyes slowly passed over everyone, he glanced at Suyun, paused, and finally his eyes fell on Chu Zinggao, making eye contact with him. "Uncle, you want Suyun and I to avoid suspicion, I understand. It's just that you just came back from abroad and don't know much about the company and home. The company's affairs are simple, and it won't be a problem for a few vice presidents to take care of it for the time being. Whether it's the company or the family, I can take over. Do you think I can't do what you, a young boy, can do?" Chu Zinggao said disdainfully. Ignoring him, Chu Chen turned to look at Chu Qiudong, who was standing aside. "The Chu family has a huge family business, and the affairs at home are complicated, which is no easier than running a company. But now that the incident happened suddenly, in order to convince the public, we also, for the sake of the future of the Chu family, I want to temporarily hand over the control of the Chu family to the second grandfather, and I think everyone has no objection." "Chu Chen!" Unexpectedly, Chu Zinggao shouted angrily. Chu Qiudong probably didn't expect it. He was stunned for a moment, and then a faint smile appeared on his face. "This." He stopped laughing for a second, cleared his throat and said, "Well, I'm old. Being in charge of the housekeeping is really hard work. I'm afraid my body won't be able to bear it." "That's right. My second uncle is old and in poor health. Are you raising this now to deliberately make things difficult? In order to go against me, you have really good intentions," Chu Zinggao said sarcastically. "It is indeed hard work to be the head of a house, and the responsibilities are particularly important, so it is even more necessary for reliable people to sit in this position." With that said, Chu Chen put a seal in Chu Qiudong's hand. "Second grandpa, now I can only work hard for you." Chu Zinggao never expected that Chu Chen would hand over the seal of the head of the family to Chu Qiudong in front of so many people. He was anxious and angry, wishing he could just grab it from him. But after all, in front of so many clan elders, he didn't dare to make a big move. He gritted his molar teeth and said with a smile, "Second uncle, you don't need to work these things when you are old. The Chu family has many affairs, so it is better to temporarily buy me." Before his hand touched the seal, Chu Qiudong suddenly turned his wrist and put it away. He raised his eyes to look at Chu Chen. His eyes were much calmer. "I am indeed old, but fortunately I am not confused. Since the Chu family at this critical moment, I will try my best to support him and hope that I can do something for the Chu family with this broken body. Chu Chen, seeing how, don't worry if you leave the seal of the head of the family with me. I am here to take care of it after the investigation into the death of my eldest brother is clear. I will still return the seal to its original owner." The 4 words "return to the original owner" are particularly emphasized and mean. He neither said it was Chu Chen nor Chu Zinggao, but used original owner. This word means different things to everyone's ears. No matter how unwilling Chu Zinggao was, at this point, he couldn't rob him by force. He could only glare at him bitterly and snort coldly. At this time, Suyun also saw it. The incense, the cause of death, and the reason for the crime are all just excuses, an excuse to fight for power and gain. It doesn't matter whether the incense was the cause of death or not. It doesn't matter whether she was the murderer who hurt Grandpa. The most important thing is that the whole thing can involve Chu Chen and make him inescapably involved. He must be the person in charge of the Chu family. Position up and down. So, when Chu Zinggao comes back this time, his ultimate goal is to seize power. Since my second grandpa is now in charge, why don't you give me some instructions on how to investigate my grandpa's affairs? Suyun directly raised the question to Chu Qiudong. Being a leader is not just about being in charge, but also making decisions about things. She wanted to hear how they wanted to fool this matter. End of this chapter. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 318. Chapter 318, remember this lesson. Glancing at her, Chu Qiudong cleared his throat and said, your grandfather's death must be thoroughly investigated. But now you are holding on to different opinions, and it is difficult to tell the difference for a while. But don't worry, since I have taken over Chu, I will definitely give you a satisfactory answer. Sure enough, she wanted to muddle through. Suyun sneered twice, second grandpa, everyone understands the truth, but this matter should always have a conclusion. Grandpa can't delay the burial, at least there should be a time limit, right? What, you are so anxious, are you feeling guilty? Chu Qiudong glanced at her and said unhappily. There is no point in a dispute of words. It doesn't matter whether I am guilty or not. What matters is the result. I just hope that Grandpa will not die in an unknown way. Suyun did not back down at all. The clan elders are all here today. Since the second grandpa after taking over the Chu family, I believe I can convince everyone with actions, not just words. How about it? 3. Within 3 days, I believe everyone wants to know the final result. 3 days is all. Before Chu Qiudong could say anything, Chu Xinggao said, but Suyun, you can only stay at Chu's house for these 3 days, and you can't go anywhere. In case someone takes the opportunity to escape, during these 3 days, no one in the Chu family is allowed to leave Su City. Chu Chen, what do you think? As he said that, he looked at Chu Chen slightly provocatively. Chu Chen nodded expressionlessly, I have no objection. This matter has been settled for the time being. Suyun took a deep look at her grandfather's photo. No matter what, she will seek justice for her grandfather. The clansmen dispersed, and Suyun quickly blocked Chu Chen's path. Chu Chen, you. Didn't I tell you not to come back? Chu Chen interrupted her words and sighed faintly, that's all, you can stay here for now. You must be tired after the journey back, so take a good rest first. Hearing the profound meaning in his words, she looked sideways and saw people coming and going in the house, seemingly busy, and everyone's ears were perked up. Well, if you need anything, come to me, she said and went out. Yao was sitting in the living room drinking tea, looking calm and composed, without the slightest trace of anxiety on his face. She seemed to feel something when she walked out. She raised her eyes and looked over. The two met each other's eyes. At that moment, Suyun felt as if a piece of stone had been lifted off her shoulders, making her feel a little lighter. Hurried towards his direction, I'm not embarrassing you, are you? I am the grandson-in-law of the Chu family, and I am one of our own. How could you make things difficult for me? He raised the corners of his lips and smiled, have you paid homage to Grandpa? Yes, she nodded and said, let's stay at home for the next 2 days and then leave later. Okay, he didn't ask any more questions and just agreed. The Chu family's house is still very large, with several buildings in front and back, which is enough to accommodate all the clan elders. Of course, most of the clan elders live in the city. We just reached a consensus not to leave Sioux City, and we didn't say we couldn't go back. So most of the people living in the city went back to their respective homes. Chu Xinggao settled down in the main building, and seemed to have calmed down after they dispersed, but everyone knew that there was a turbulent undercurrent behind the calm. Standing by the window and looking out for a while, the disciples of the Chu family did not practice kung fu due to the big funeral, and the empty compound looked particularly deserted. Thinking about the orderliness in the past, I suddenly miss the days when they worked hard to practice kung fu. Although the weather is getting warmer, it's still cold in the morning and evening. Yao put a cloak on her from behind and hugged her into his arms. Leaning softly in his arms, Suyun leaned her head back and looked at the scenery outside. I just feel that people's hearts are cold, even worse than the cold winter. Yao smiled, turned her body to face him, took her hand and gently placed it on his chest, saying warmly, people's hearts are not only cold, but also hot. My Yunur, not such a pessimistic person. Such loving words made her cheeks heat up. The hand held by him remained motionless and pressed against his body. His body temperature was under her palm, and the ironing made her feel much warmer. You knew this was a game, but you still accompanied me to get into this game. Now you are stuck here with me. I'm sorry, she sighed in a low voice. His eyes suddenly darkened, and he suddenly leaned down and bit her lip hard. It was not a gentle kiss, but a hard bite with his teeth, causing her to gasp in pain. After biting her and letting go, he looked into her eyes and said, remember this lesson, if you tell me such things in the future, it will be more than just a lesson. Suyun. This domineering and touching man. She pursed her lips, feeling a tingling sensation on her lips, but the reality is that we are trapped here, and they will definitely not give me the answer I want. She had already seen through it in the morning hall. The murderer and the charges were all just a conspiracy to seize power from Chu Chen. She could see through it, and Chu Chen naturally understood it, but what she didn't understand was that Chu Chen, why do you have to let it go? Since he has been in power in the Chu family for many years, why should he be afraid of a so-called elder who suddenly returns? If they don't give it to us, we'll find it ourselves, he said lightly, and you couldn't hear the slightest worry or anxiety in his voice. Suyun truly saw from him what it means to remain calm even when Mount Tai collapses in front of him, as if everything was under his control, with that kind of calmness, composure, and strategizing calmness. Standing next to him, even her own my heart is at peace. Yes, I'll find it myself, she nodded, but I still want to see Chu Chen first. Want to ask him why? He raised his eyebrows, and he immediately guessed what she was thinking. Yes, even if it's hard to explain, I still want to find out why. Do you want me to accompany you? He asked, holding her hand. No, I'm afraid the Chu family is full of spies now. I don't know if he will tell me, and I have a hunch that Chu Zinggao may come to find you. Then I'll wait for him, he said disapprovingly. Seeing that Suyun was about to leave, he stretched out his hand to hold her. Wait a minute. At this time, there was a knock on the door, and Yao raised his voice, come in. A servant came in carrying a dinner plate, and the smell of food filled the air. You must be hungry after traveling so hard. It's not too late to eat something first. He took her hand and sat down at the table, asking the servant to put down the things. I didn't think anything of it at first, but when he said that, I felt a little hungry. After putting down the food, the servant left and closed the door. She turned around and saw someone was already using chopsticks, and raised her eyebrows. Aren't you afraid that there is poison in it? After all, there was an uproar over the poisoning incident. He raised his head and smiled. If it can be solved with such a cheap method, why bother setting up such a big situation? End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 319. Chapter 319 is not that difficult to guess. The door to Chu Chen's room was not closed, which was beyond her expectation, as if he was waiting for her. Although the door was not closed, she glanced into the room and raised her hand to knock on the door twice. Come in, Chu Chen's voice. Walking in, there was only one desk lamp turned on in the room, and the light was a bit dim. Chu Chen sat on a chair by the window, with a cup of coffee in front of him. The aroma was fragrant, but he didn't seem to have touched it. Chu Chen. Sit down. He raised his eyes and looked at her calmly, and said. Although there was still no expression on his face, Su-Yun felt that the look in his eyes was at least much better than before in the morning hall. You. She hesitated for a moment, wanting to ask, but she didn't know where to start. Didn't I tell you not to come back? You're still so stubborn. Chu Chen started talking first. Although he was complaining, you could tell that he actually cared. Do you think I can avoid this muddy water if I don't come back? She smiled disapprovingly and looked at Chu Chen thoughtfully. He just sat there quietly, looking far away. Outside the window was a large forest. At the moment, he could only see vague shadows, but his eyes fell in that direction. Chu Chen didn't speak, but she still had a lot of questions to ask in her heart. Looked in the direction of the door. Because the door was open, the line of sight was very unobstructed. You could see if there was anyone outside at a glance. In the morning hall, Chu Chen stopped her from talking and obviously didn't let her ask any more questions. She guessed that she was afraid that the walls had ears, so there wouldn't be any problems here. What's going on with Chu Zenggao? She asked bluntly. Although he is a brother-in-law, he must be worthy of the title of uncle if his behavior is respectable. Otherwise, it is just a name. Chu Chen didn't speak, but pursed his lips. In such a big situation, the accusation is put on my head. Is it actually to drag you into trouble? In the end, it is for the power of the Chu family in your hands. Just because he didn't speak, it didn't mean that Su-Yun would give up asking. She continued to ask, I just don't understand why you are afraid of him. Why do you want to take the initiative to hand over the control of the Chu family? Afraid, Chu Chen finally spoke. He glanced at her, shook his head and chuckled. He owed his body, but he picked up the coffee cup in front of him and took a leisurely sip. It's been a few years since you took over the Chu family. Even if he comes back, even if he is an elder, you can't just take it away with just one sentence. Also, what happened to Grandpa? Soon is there really something wrong with the fragrance? There is a test report, but it was produced by them. Who knows if there was any manipulation? She still trusts Chu Chen. After all, we grew up together. Chu Chen seems to be a cold and reserved personality, but in fact he is cold on the outside and hot on the inside. For example, he would help her investigate the matter about Luo Yuanhang. For example, he would mediate and repair the relationship between her and her grandfather. For example, he would call her to ask her not to come back. Slowly putting down the cup, he lowered his eyes and nodded slightly. The movement was not large, but she saw it clearly, which meant that there was something wrong with the incense. Her face became solemn. The incense was made by her own hands. She was absolutely confident that there would be no mistakes in the preparation process. She added some medicinal materials, but the medicinal properties of the medicinal materials were carefully researched. They are very helpful for sleeping and calming the mind without any toxic or side effects. And she also tried it over and over several times before it took so long to make it. She personally handed the incense to Chu Chen. At this stage, she didn't think anything would go wrong. After you got the incense back, did you light it yourself for Grandpa, or did you give it to the servant? Looking at her deeply, as if he had guessed her train of thought, Chu Chen moved his lips and faintly uttered two words, Uncle Luo. Su-Yun. It goes without saying that Uncle Luo has served Mr. Chu for many years and is very loyal. In the entire Chu family, no one would doubt Uncle Luo's loyalty. In other words, the suspicion of the whole matter fell on the three of them. It was precisely because of this that Chu Zenggao and Chu Qiudong took this matter as a target to attack them, because she and Chu Chen had no way to defend themselves. Yes, there is currently no evidence to prove that it was them, but there is also no evidence to prove that they are innocent. This is a conspiracy. Su-Yun clenched her hands into fists. Too vicious. It was not just a frame-up, she wanted to know who had tampered with the incense. I must find the real culprit who killed Grandpa. Then what? Chu Chen asked calmly. Make him pay. If they dare to do this, they have already cleaned up. Standing up, Chu Chen took 2 steps forward, raised his hand and pointed out the door, pointing in the direction of the corridor. You also know that the Chu family has never with the habit of installing cameras. Even if someone stands outside Grandpa's door and does something, there will be no evidence as long as they are not caught. Looking in the direction he pointed, Su Yun frowned slightly. What Chu Chen said was indeed correct. In fact, the other party also grasped this point. The most important thing is that they obviously struck first and were caught off guard. Otherwise, they would definitely be able to find clues. I remember there is a subject called traceology, and I believe that as long as you do it, you will definitely leave evidence. I will definitely find out the real culprit who killed Grandpa. Chu Chen retracted his hand and turned to face her. Although there is no conclusive evidence at present, it's not that difficult to guess who that person is it? This sentence directly penetrated her heart. She said she must catch the real culprit, but who is this person? Does she really have no goal or direction in her heart? Chu Xinggao suddenly returned. At this point in time, he was so aggressive that he could invite so many clan elders. Although the clan elders didn't say much at that time, they were obviously biased towards him, and they were able to take away what Chu Chen had in his hands. If you take away the power and say it is a coincidence, you are really treating people like a 3-year-old child. Ken. From the bottom of her heart, Su Yun did not hope that this would be the case. That's right, now they and Chu Xinggao are on opposite sides, facing each other head to head. She has no family affection for this uncle who was expelled from the Chu family in his early years. But no matter what, he is Grandpa's biological son and a member of the Chu family. For power or other reasons, he will really do anything to Grandpa. Black hands. Su Yun didn't want to believe it. After a moment of silence, she asked in a very soft voice, "Are you afraid that the Chu family will be in trouble if you hand over the power of the family so easily?" If Chu Chen insists on refusing to hand it over, the new faction that supports him and the elders who support Chu Xinggao will inevitably cause a split. By then, the Chu family will inevitably be in chaos, and the impact and losses will be immeasurable. End of this chapter. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 320. Chapter 320. The news hasn't spread yet. Chu Chen's answer is no longer important, his attitude says everything. Going back to the room, she found that Yao was not in the room. She didn't know where he had gone, but as he said, it was within the confines of the Chu family. Although it was dangerous, it was safe, so she was not too worried. Some things must be done without delay. She took out her mobile phone and called Arian. "Arian, there is a small bottle of incense in the safe in the laboratory. Please take it out for me and send it to the official testing agency. Do ingredient identification." Why, Arian hadn't seen her for several days. She was very happy to hear her voice, but she heard her say this before she could even talk. "I'm useful, just help me do it," she said. "By the way, don't tell anyone about this, just go and do it yourself. After the report comes out, just take a photo and send it to me, and you can keep the report." Oh, she was a little confused. In fact, their perfumers all know the ingredients of spices, and there is no need to do such things as identification. If a third party is needed to do an identification report, then there is only one possibility: the ingredients may be what went wrong. Hearing her tone, she still seemed quite nervous, so Arian didn't ask any more questions. "Are you still in the imperial capital now?" "No, I'm going back to Chu's house." "Oh, then, you and Mr. Si are also together?" "Yes," Su Yun responded. "How are you doing there?" "I've been away recently, can the project cope with it?" "Fortunately, They are all basic tasks. They are simple, but a bit boring. When will you come back? I will wait for you to develop new products, Arian said half jokingly, half seriously. As a perfumer, constantly developing new products and discovering new combinations and fusions are the most challenging and fulfilling things. Wu Arian would learn to make some when she had nothing to do, but she had to admit that talent was still very important. No matter how hard she tried, she always felt that she was still a little behind high-end perfumes, and every time Suyun only needed a slight tweak, even just a tiny bit, can make all the difference. Yeah, she didn't know how long she would stay here. Although it was 3 days, those 3 days were just a period of time for Chu Qiudong to prevent him from procrastinating endlessly. As for the cause of Grandpa's death, she will eventually be the one to find out the truth. Arian had been following her for so long, and she could hear her absent-mindedness. Are you okay? Are things in the Imperial City not going well? You don't have to be discouraged. It is difficult to get into the Fragrance Industry Association. In addition to ability, you have to go through qualifications, and we won't be surprised if you don't get admitted. Winning a few more international awards is no better than that. By the way, are you going to see your grandpa? Why did you run away from the imperial capital to the Chu family? Thinking that she was unhappy about not being able to enter the Perfumery Industry Association, Wu Arian kindly enlightened her and had no idea what happened to her in the imperial capital. However, her words did reveal a message. She did not know the news that her grandfather had passed away. In other words, doesn't the outside world know? The news about Grandpa's death hasn't spread yet? Something happened at home. After a pause, she thought for a moment and said, "My grandpa passed away." "Your grandpa passed away." The voice was so sharp that it could almost penetrate the speaker of the mobile phone. Immediately took the phone away, and waited until the sound was quieter before bringing it closer to her ear. At this moment, Arian's thoughts continued to come. How could it be? Didn't you say last time that although he didn't sleep well, he was still in good spirits? And it seemed very sudden. After a pause, as if thinking of something, Arian said, "That's not right. Your grandpa is not Mr. Chu. If he passes away, this matter will definitely be on the news. There is no way I haven't seen it." She usually likes to read some gossip information. If the news of Mr. Chu's death is published, she will not miss it. Maybe the news hasn't spread yet. Suyun pursed her lips and said, "Arian, I hope you can let the news out by the way. Let it go." After hesitating for a moment, Arian asked strangely, "Why do you want me to let it go? Won't the Chu family announce the news to the outside world?" This kind of thing is usually announced to the outside world by the family, and with Mr. Chu's status, it is bound to be reported in newspapers, and then major families come to express their condolences. However, she has nothing to do with the Chu family. Wouldn't it be too weird for her to announce the revelation? There's something going on at home, so, thank you for your hard work. She heard the sound of the door opening, looked up and saw that Si Yao had opened the door and walked in, with Su Feng following behind him. Si Yao was about to speak, but when his eyes saw the mobile phone she was holding, Si Yao said nothing. He turned to Su Feng and whispered softly, "You go first." "Yes, Mr. Si," Su Feng responded. I don't know how this sound, which was not loud, was heard by Arian on the phone. "Sister Yun, I seem to hear Su Feng's voice." "It's him, he's there too." "What, do you have anything to say?" As she said that, she stood up and walked in the direction of Su Feng. Su Feng was about to leave, but it sounded like it had something to do with him, so he stood still and looked back. "No, no, no, I have nothing to say to him." The little woman quickly denied it, but couldn't help but ask, "Well, I just want to know if his phone is broken." "His cell phone." Su Yun glanced at Su Feng, then looked at her cell phone, the corners of her lips raised slightly. "Someone asked you, is your cell phone broken?" She deliberately raised her voice so that Arian on the phone could hear her. Su Feng frowned slightly, but still nodded honestly, "It's broken." Immediately explained to Si Yao, "It just broke down yesterday, so I replaced it with a spare machine and haven't had a chance to send it for repair yet." Si Yao nodded slightly, "I didn't ask." The implication is, you don't need to explain this to me, just explain it to whoever asks. "Over there," Su Yun said to the phone, "you know, it's broken. Do you have any other questions? Miss Wu Arian." He deliberately called her by her first and last name. Wu Arian on the other end of the phone said hurriedly, "Hey, I was just asking casually." "Sister Yun, you are teasing me, you are going too far." Then he quickly hung up the phone. After Su Yun finished speaking, she straightened her hand and handed the phone to Su Feng, only to hear a crisp hang-up sound and busy signal coming from inside. "Su Yun." "Su Feng." That's a bit embarrassing." Pulling back her hand, Su Yun said to Su Feng, "What's your backup phone number? Can you give it to me later?" End of this chapter.